Intergovernmental Relations Committee meeting for Tuesday, September 20th, 2016 is called to order. I would ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Miller.
Here.
Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent. Mr. Brady. Mr. Brady is absent. Mr. Germana. Here. Mr. Greenspan. Here. We have a quorum, and I like the record to reflect that Ms. Conwell is in attendance.
Okay, great. Thank you for joining us.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I'd like to move that we excuse Councilman Simon. She's on vacation.
Okay.
Oh, we don't have to do it, but I'd like to do it.
Okay. Been moved and seconded?
I can't second. I'll second.
Yes, okay. Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I haven't heard. Have we heard whether the council president's coming? Okay, well, I move that we excuse his absence as well. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Is there any public comment related to the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair. No one has signed in.
Okay, we have in your packet the minutes from the May 31st meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from May 31st. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. And the ayes have it. And the minutes are approved. We have no matters referred to the committee. We do have two very important presentations, which will be the centerpiece of today's meeting. And we are going to start with Mark Griffin, our Inspector General, for his semi-annual report. Thank you very much for coming and presenting.
Thank you, Chairperson Miller, and thank you, council members. I'm very happy to present the semi-annual report for the first half of 2016. And I want to, rather than go through and simply reread what's in there, because I know you've had a chance, but to talk about what we talked about 6 months ago and to let you know that I've tried to respond to the concerns of this committee and the goals that we set out 6 months ago. One of the things that we discussed was the backlog of cases in my office and how we would resolve those. And so one of the things that we targeted during this 6-month period was to resolve the oldest cases first. When I took over the office, approximately 60% of cases were older than 360 days. In January of 2016, we'd reduced that to 40%. But in conversations with you, you appropriately said, well, we need to get that number down even more. And so as of June 30, 2015, we've reduced the number of older cases by another 36%. And you asked about what were the total numbers. We reduced the total numbers of old cases from 42 to 27. But that's still not good enough. We need to be more aggressive in getting those cases down. And so our goal for this next period is to get the number of cases older than a year old down to 12 or 15. And some of those will always be there because some reviews and cases simply take a longer time. But it's our hope to get that number down. We closed 22 investigations in this first half of 2016. Which is right on track for what we've done in the past. The period before that was 23 closed investigations. Before that was 21, 21, 17, and 18. So in the low 20s is really pretty consistent. But the second goal that we have talked about for my office is to target financial incentives for the county and to look at financial returns. And so we've tried to do a couple of things to advance that agenda. One is I hired Pete McGinty, who was a 30-year auditor with the state of Ohio, to bring into my office a set of skills and expertise to really look at the funding of the county and to see where we can save money and where we can be more efficient. And he started in February, and a substantial part of his time was spent reviewing the Department of Development, and we'll have a set of reports which we expect to finish in this coming semi-annual period. But we also continued to look at contractor background checks to see where we could save money because we wanted to make sure that anyone who was doing business with the county was current with respect to their taxes. And so as part of the background check process, we identified $130,000 in uncollected delinquent property taxes and government tax liens. That's a little bit less than what we've identified in the past, and I think some of that was because substantial resources have been devoted to looking at the Department of Development, but that again continues to be an important goal of my office. Another goal was working to promote a culture of compliance, and so we did several important things over the past 6 months, or over the 6-month period. The first was to collaborate with you and with the executive to adopt and revise the County Ethics Code. The original County Ethics Code was adopted 4 years ago, but it's important that that's not a dead letter, and it's important that County Council, the County Executive, and I would single out Council to County Council Mike King, who really put a lot of effort in, and I would also take the opportunity to thank Councilmember Greenspan for the tremendous amount of time and effort it went to make sure that that is a living and breathing document. We also worked to expand internal outreach to county personnel. We met with HR, we gave a number of presentations, and tried to begin the process of making ethics a core part of what this county does. But that extends beyond the county as well, and so for the first time we worked with the revived Citizens League of Greater Cleveland. I think many of you remember that in its prior incarnation, the Citizens League was an important part of our community. It has been restarted, and so we were happy to provide a continuing legal education presentation along with the Ohio Ethics Council on that as well. But I also want to be clear that compliance applies to my office also. It's not just for other people, but I care about it deeply. And I think that you, many of you know that in this past month, although not in the reporting period, I put Andrea Nelson Moore on administrative leave. County Code 406 and Ohio Administrative Code 123 provide unclassified employees with the right to run as candidates in partisan elections. That is a right guaranteed by state law and county law, but not to use county time and resources. When it came to my attention that there may have been violations of that, I insisted that she be put on unpaid administrative leave, and there will be a disciplinary process that will go forward with that. But I want you to know that it's something that I care about, not just for other people, but for my office as well. The fourth goal that we targeted was to timely address the increased number of contractor renewals and registration forms. We've moved forward on that. We expect to have approximately twice as many renewals this time as previously. Let me talk briefly about the different things that my office does, because although what people often want to know about are the investigations, a large part of our resources are for other things. So for example, debarments are an important factor, and again, when I was here 6 months ago, Councilmember Conwell asked me about the unpaid liens that we had identified from the Department of Development, and her question to me was, well, that's really nice, but what are you doing about it? Which was a fair question. So one of the things that we've done with respect to debarments is we identified those who had not paid their debts to us and initiated debarment procedures so that we don't continue to give loans, because one of the things that we found was that on a couple of occasions, people who had defaulted on loans to us were getting additional loans. So we wanted to begin that process and to, again, be responsive to council members' questions. But so currently we have 34 pending debarments. None rolled off this cycle. There are currently 42 on the list. But in the 6-month period that we're in right now, July through the end of the year, one rolled off already. That was Mr. Nieheiser. And a second one will roll off in December of this year. We also reviewed 2,643 driver's license abstracts and identified any risk to the county for those who were driving without a valid driver's license or under suspension. We analyzed 228 secondary employment and private business activity disclosures, 85 nepotism forms. We issued 31 ethics opinions. One of the things that we tried to do, which overlapped a little bit, was to streamline our process during the Republican National Convention so we could respond quickly to ethics inquiries to our office for all the exciting and worthwhile events that were going on at the RNC. And so one of the things that I think that we did a good job on was responding quickly to requests from the executive branch, but also from council regarding RNC events. Let me talk briefly about our budget. We have operated under budget. We expect to have approximately a $53,000 surplus at the end of the year, or at least that's what was projected as of the end of the year. But I do want to say that part of that is because in this biennial budget, the budget anticipated that we would draw down fully on our special vendor fund. So at the end of this 2-year period, the special vendor fund is likely to be down to zero. But again, that's all within the current budget. So let me talk a little bit about what we're trying to do now and what our goals are for the current 6-month period. And then obviously I'm here to answer questions for as long as you would like to ask questions. But first, we want to continue to focus on financial returns to the county. And a big part of that is implementing a data analytics package. And so at the end of June, we decided this is something that we wanted to implement in our office. And we just signed a memorandum of agreement, I guess it was last week, with the internal auditor to use their big data analytics package, which will let us look at Famous, it'll let us look at SAP to be able to track and examine the finances of the county to see if there are any anomalies. So we hope that that will expand our ability to target financial savings. We're going to finish our review of the Department of Development. But secondly, we're going to continue to expand outreach both within and outside of the county administration. I mentioned to you the Citizens League presentation. That got a very good reception. They've asked us to come back next year as well, so we hope to do that. We've made presentations to directors at JFS. We are in the process of drafting the plain language handbook. One of the things that I thought was very helpful and important in the council's revision of the ethics code was the requirement to my office that we take all of this legal language and put it into plain language. So we've had an outstanding summer intern work on a plain language review. We should get that done hopefully in the next month or so as well. And that will include a draft of frequently asked questions so that it's not just lawyers, but it's plain language for everyone. And we've also coordinated with the executive and with council regarding ethics issues surrounding the Republican National Convention. Our third goal is to timely address the increased number of contractor renewal registrations. This is our second year for renewals. So the first year was at the very beginning of our process of having background registrations. And so in 2012, there was a significant increase, and this is now coming due, and so we're working to handle that. And the last piece I discussed earlier is to resolve the oldest cases first. We want to get the total number of outstanding investigations down to 15 that are what we consider older and try to be quicker and more responsive. So I didn't want to simply reread my report. I know that you've all had a chance to take a look at it, but I am here to answer any questions that you have and to say thank you for the opportunity to serve as your Inspector General.
Thank you very much. Questions by my colleagues? Councilman Germana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the whistleblower, I noticed that many of these were referred back to the departments. What happens in the case of their whistleblowing on the supervisor, or the supervisor is part of the problem?
Right. So one of the things that we've said is where possible, we're going to try to refer some of the minor's not the right word, some of the HR issues to the supervisors. But the issue that you've raised is what happens when it involves a supervisor. We handle that ourselves, and we have had, I think since we've implemented the new policy, 2 or 3 pending issues that we are looking at. I think one has been resolved and 2 others are in the process of being looked at. But so in those circumstances, we do not refer those cases out. So what we've tried to do is we have reserved our right to look at them, and we've tried to make discretionary decisions about where we think a supervisor can do it themselves.
Okay, thank you for that answer. And then a second question I had. You referred to people that defaulted on loans as a disbarment, and my line of thinking, disbarment was for contractors or suppliers that non-performed. So I'm just wondering what the distinction. Why are they all classified as disbarment?
Well, they're all classified as contractors. So under the current county ethics code, if you have a contract with the county, you are a contractor, including including loans.
Okay.
And so the idea is that if we've loaned you money once and you haven't paid that yet, we should put you on a list to make sure we don't loan money to you again. And so debarment would apply to anyone who does business with the county as a contractor and anyone who owes obligations to us to perform. So mostly a contractor where you're supposed to deliver goods and services, but contractors are also people who take out loans who have an obligation to us to repay the money we gave them. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
No,
but
it does. It does. I just didn't think of loans as disbarment.
I'd like to just say we've had an interesting experience with sending out our notices of debarment. In some of these situations, we were told that the people who loaned money were uncollectible. And what we found was when we sent them an issue of debarment, they picked up the phone in a handful of cases and said, hey, nobody's ever asked me for this before. I don't want to be debarred. Let me enter into a payment agreement with you. And so I think Councilmember Conwell's suggestion about what more we could do, this at least has helped us kind of get some people back on track. And it seems to be a tool that is far from perfect. It is far from perfectly effective, but it's better than nothing.
I guess the other thing I'm having difficulty with is understanding why the Inspector General would be involved in people not paying their loans. Why wouldn't that be our legal counsel, our law department?
The answer to that is I think it's both. One of the things that happens, so we send out a notice of potential debarment, and for those loan obligees who come in, we always meet with legal. And what we say is, look, we are separate, but we're together. It's the law department who does the collection. That's not what we do. But frankly, it's a way of getting their attention with a debarment letter. And so what we say is, if you can enter into an agreement or a resolution or a settlement or an arrangement with law, then we're happy. So we see it as we are independent, and yet we try to support the actions of the law department. And so if they come to us and say, hey, we worked out a payment plan, we say we're good. We will withdraw the debarment and let it go forward. There's a little bit of good cop, bad cop there, but you're right that collections are really the law department.
And I guess the final question I'd have is, and I don't know what meeting it was in, but there was, I don't know if it was an economic development or what, but there was this insinuation that some of these loans, there was wink, wink, we're giving this to you, but you don't have to pay them back. Have you ever been involved in uncovering those?
We have heard that as well, but then when we try to follow up, it turns out that the rumors are we can't substantiate them. So the loans in question from the particular pool of loans that we were looking at were approved by a third party. And there were some claims by the debtors of, oh, they told us that we didn't have to pay these back. But then when you went to them, they'd say, no, we never said that. They may have thought we said that, but we did not. So, it may be a suggestion by the debtors that they were told they didn't have to pay it back.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're following up on this.
Councilman Greenspan.
So just getting back to, not to delve into the challenge with the Deputy Inspector General, but so that was a judge is kind of an interesting scenario because they're a partisan primary but a nonpartisan general. Is there a distinction if it was a nonpartisan? Well, I guess you made the distinction. It was a nonpartisan issue, race, because the end general is nonpartisan. Is that?
Yes and no.
Okay.
The basis for the decision was that Ohio Administrative Code and the County Code say that if you're an unclassified employee, you have a right to run for partisan office unless there's a specific law, statute, or constitution which prohibits you from doing so. So, I read the law as it is intended to state, I think pretty clearly, that unless I could find a law that prevented her from running, she had a right to do so, as any citizen would. But that doesn't mean that you can use county resources, time, or property in furtherance of your campaign. So what I tried to do is I tried to make my rule consistent with the state of Ohio, because it implements and enforces the equivalent Ohio Administrative Code. And it was not an issue so much of whether it was partisan or nonpartisan, but it was really classified versus unclassified. But I want to talk a little bit about the issue I think that it creates, which is I'm required to follow that rule. And yet, by doing so, it opens up, I think, my office to legitimate questions about, is that appropriate? And so, I think that at a later date, there should be a conversation about whether we should carve the IG's office out of permitting any political activity.
Mm-hmm. Well, the reason I ask is the ORC statute. You're right. Obviously, you're right, but
not obviously.
But it relates to obviously classified versus non-classified, unclassified, as being an initial distinction between holding partisan office. But I'm just curious because a judge, we have 5 cities in the county that have partisanly elected municipal offices. And so if you're classified, you obviously cannot run for one of those and be employed by the county, not by county statute or county rule, but by state law. Although the first executive, and I believe that executive order still stands, that no one who works for him can hold a partisan office. I don't know where that stands. That one actually may have been waived, obviously because there are some members. No, those are still nonpartisan offices. But I guess my point is, in a situation where, with the judge in particular, is a judge a judicial candidate, regardless if they work for your office or not, their primary is partisan, but their general is nonpartisan, correct?
Correct, yes.
It's kind of a weird hybrid there.
It's unusual.
Right,
yeah.
Right. So if they were classified running for judge anywhere in the county, then they could not run for judge.
Correct.
Okay, but because she's just in this case, this employee was unclassified, gave them the authority to do so.
That's right.
Okay. Another question, another area of focus, which was one of the main focuses when we put together the ethics ordinance and the IG ordinance soon to follow back in 2011 was my belief that yes, we need to address the ethical issues and practices of the county, which your office has done a good job in moving us in that direction. The other emphasis, as we talked early on and when you took over, was the broader scope of, as you refer to it, I think you're moving in that direction of returning money back to the county where there's an opportunity. So I'm really interested now in what efforts you plan on making towards that objective as you move forward, say over the next 6 months or next year.
We currently have a number of investigations that I think will be wrapped up in this, and I don't want to talk about confidential reviews or investigations at this time, but I think that there are a number of pieces. One is we have current reviews with respect to operational, efficiency and waste. Some of that may bleed over into questionable timekeeping practices. I don't want to put those too far. So those are current pieces. The second piece was hiring a professional auditor with financial skills that we didn't have, which I think is helpful. And then the third piece is big data and the use of a data analytics package, which I signed the memorandum of agreement, I think, Friday. So my hope is that sometime this week, we will then start to use that to try to look for low-hanging fruit. So my thought is that we would start by looking at areas of the county where we have substantial expenditures. I'll give you an example of something that we looked at this semi-annual period, which I think is not necessarily a good use of resources. We got a complaint that a person was allegedly had borrowed county property to snake out their toilet at home, $35 snake. So, we immediately went out there. It turned out it was the private property, but that is not an expensive piece of county property, but we spent probably a week of inspector general time on it. To me, that's not efficient. What I'd like to do with our big data analytics package is not look at $35 hand snakes, but to look at large expenditures for anything from public works to employee compensation to use of overtime, and to try to track that as well. So that is where I hope to go.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Inspector General, would you refresh my memory? How many you said are currently under debarment and how many pending?
One moment. I believe the number currently was 42 on the list. There will be one rolling off this December, and then there are 34 that are currently pending. And when I say pending, that's a notice of potential debarment. So the number of those that we'll actually go forward with, will depend on the responses that we get. So 42 on the list, and one will come off in December, and then a significant number will come off in early January, but I don't have that number with me.
And the 34 strikes me as a large number. How many of those are loan cases? How many of those are contracting infractions? Sense of how that divides up.
Nearly all of them are loan cases.
Uh-huh.
I believe that there are one or two that are not, but the rest are loan issues.
And for those that are debarred on loan cases, what would be the length of debarment that would be called for in that circumstance?
I think it would be 18 months for violation of a contract.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Well, we're very, very appreciative of all the work that you do. It's very important for the county's integrity and operations, and so we thank you, and we'll see you in 6 months.
Thank you. I want to thank you for your.
I do have one question.
Absolutely.
Okay, Ms. Conlon.
Through the chair to Inspector General on Councilman Miller's point. So when we utilized or leveraged or utilized the letter format that you will be disbarred, what are the recourses the county have? Once they've defaulted on the loan, they say they don't respond in regards to the letter. What is our recourse at that point?
Well, so consistent with what Councilman Germana had indicated, there are really two separate tracks. One is the law department and one is my track. So for me, all my office can do is debar them for a certain period of time. But that is additive to what the law department can do. So they can take a judgment. Usually there's what's called a cognovit note, where you can just walk into court and get a judgment and then begin collection proceedings. So they can then withhold taxes, they can, or levy taxes or withhold tax refunds. They can go through foreclosure proceedings. They can do bank sweeps, all of their various efforts and tools that they have. I believe that this process has now been going on for a while, and it's my understanding that the law department has reached out to a private collections firm to help protect taxpayer dollars and to have a permanent arrangement where when these loans default, they can simply refer them out to this collection agency, collection law firm, I should say.
And is there some sort of debarment list on the website or anything for people can see?
Yes, there is. We post everyone who has been debarred on our website, and OPD refers to it before approving any payments.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we now come to the second part of our program, and we would like to invite Rob Zimmerman and Rachel Winder to please come forward. They are our representatives working for us in Columbus. There's always significant risks when the legislature is in session, and also some opportunities, hopefully. And so as you start your presentation, I took a quick look at the presentation, and there was one thing I didn't see mention of, which is that, and this has been going on for years now, that we we get something like only about 10% of the mental health allocation that we would get if it were allocated on a population basis. I mean, it would be outrageous enough if it were 80% or 75%, but it is ridiculously low. So I would ask you to weave into your presentation what, if anything, is being done to address that situation. And with that, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. As the chairman said, I'm Rob Zimmerman. I am chairperson of our public law practice at Benish Friedlander, also a partner and lawyer at that firm. With me is Rachel Winder, who's in our Columbus office, and Rachel is our government relations manager. The first thing that we want to say to all of you this afternoon is thank you. It's really a tremendous opportunity for us to be here and to give you the presentation which we've put together, but we really view this as a discussion and an interaction, and I can already see from the chairperson that we've begun that. We've already gotten some very useful feedback. So while we have put together a pretty extensive PowerPoint, if you find that we are not addressing the issues that you want us to address, just say so. You're certainly not going to hurt our feelings whatsoever. We're here to work with you and to serve you, and our hope is that at the conclusion of today's hearing, we'll be better informed, you'll be better informed, and we'll be better working partners with each other for the benefit of the citizens of Cuyahoga County. This is now our second opportunity to have given a presentation like this, so I just want to take a couple of moments to kind of go through how it is that we go about our business in Columbus and also here back in Cuyahoga County. The first thing, hopefully you've noticed that we've learned from our mistakes. We have the current logo on the cover sheet as well as the proper council districts. So if we do anything else, at least we've done that right. How is it that we do our work? Well, we work very closely with your law director, Bob Triazzi, and assistant law director, Ruchi Asher, and we're very pleased that both of them are here, and again, encourage them to chime in if there's anything in this presentation that we're missing. We are in very constant contact. We do have a set call every Friday at 10 o'clock, but many times we're in much more frequent communication than that via email, voice calls, meetings, whatever the case may be. We really had an opportunity to get a bird's eye view and very much an on-the-ground perspective as the new administration came in and worked to develop its policy objectives. Very broadly speaking, we know there's much more than this, focusing on infant mortality, early childhood education, and workforce development. And we have also gone through what we would call a policy priority and development exercise with Law Director Triazzi and Assistant Law Director Asher. There were a number of meetings that took place outside of our presence where they met with all of the directors and many of the assistant directors and other key staff people to really drill down on, okay, what are the key priorities for the county? What are the issues that you really need help with in Columbus? And we had an opportunity to meet last month with a number of these directors, and frankly, that led to a follow-up meeting dealing with some criminal justice issues specifically. And as a matter of fact, we've got some very direct and specific information dealing with the heroin and opioid epidemic, which we'll talk to about briefly. We've been asked to organize our efforts in terms of advocacy and also reporting within three very broad categories. One dealing with revenue impacts, and we'll talk a lot about that. You know, what are we doing to bring in additional money from Columbus to help the bottom line of our county? General policy and departmental program initiatives, some of which are quite specific and we'll be speaking about, as well as community and regional initiatives. And I want to say that I know for a fact that it's particularly important to this administration for us to be working with our natural partners on a whole host of issues. And I'm particularly glad that Councilman Greenspan is here as a member of this committee because of his active participation in the CCAO, the County Commissioners Association of Ohio, which is a great partner of ours, as well as an information resource. So we went through as I said, the policy and agenda exercise, which was extremely worthwhile, and we look forward to discussing some of those specifics in a couple of minutes. But I think what makes the most sense is to give you a little flavor of what we've done for you, this General Assembly, working with you, and also what needs to be done. And with that, Rachel, you want to take over with some of these specifics, and then I'll chime in as we can. I should also mention that Rachel, being in Columbus, is over at the State House literally every day. And when there are events in the evening, of which there are many, Councilman Miller knows that very well. She is in constant contact with members of the General Assembly as well as members of the governor's administration. And it's truly valuable. And in a moment, Rachel's going to tell kind of a funny story where we got some good work done for you sort of at the last minute. I am in Columbus frequently, certainly not as frequently as Rachel, as she lives there. I try to be very much a force multiplier when I'm there, and when I'm up in Cleveland, I'm trying to interact as much as I can with all of you, the members of our Cuyahoga County delegation, and others that can be of assistance to our work.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that we actually got done in 2016. Including there was an issue regarding land bank taxes that was important to the county, and it had been pending for a while. We were sort of brought into the issue a little bit late in the session, but once we were there, we understood the issue. We went to work and were successful in getting it done. There were a couple of touch and go moments when, for instance, our amendment, the bill that our amendment was attached to, also got an amendment attached to it regarding pet stores and dog breeding, and the whole committee went crazy, and everybody there had pink shirts on, and we thought for a minute it wasn't going to happen, but it did. The end of May was sort of like a lame duck session down in Columbus because they were trying to get so much done before they broke before the election. Another very interesting amendment, about a week before the last week of session, we received word that some funding dollars were about to expire. Going back to the last budget, Senator Sandra Williams was successful in getting the county $1 million pilot project for SNAP recipients in Cuyahoga County specifically, and then also included in the funding was going to be to help individuals throughout the state that had difficulty attaining work, that had obstacles and barriers to work. The money was allocated for half of it to go into fiscal year 2015 and half of it to be 2016. We were about a week out of the last week of session when we were informed that $500,000 of that was about to expire, and we needed to move it into the next fiscal year in order for us to use the dollars.
And I should say there was very little notice of that. This is kind of the interesting story that we wanted to relate. It has a happy ending for the county.
And we got right to work. We got the assistance of the Senate leadership. They helped us identify legislation. We worked with the Speaker Pro Tem in the House on a bill that he had over in the Senate. Long story short, we got an amendment drafted. It was ready to go into the bill in Senate committee one early morning. I don't even know what day, like a Tuesday or Wednesday. It was a Wednesday, last day of the session. So I went to the committee just expecting to monitor it, to watch our $500,000 get shifted into the year that it should be, and everybody's happy. But instead, I listened to all the amendments being offered, and then the bill was brought up for a vote, and our amendment did not get included.
And that was the point where I emailed Rachel from Cleveland and said, "Where's our amendment?"
I was like, "Don't tell anybody, I'm working on it." Immediately went to the chairman's office and spoke to them. They did not know why the amendment was not offered, the staff person that I was working with, because as of 2 hours before that, it was ready to go. She suggested I talk with the Senate fiscal officer in President Faber's office. I spoke with him, and he said, "Yep, sorry, we had thousands of amendments. This one simply didn't rise to the level of importance for our caucus." And at that point, he goes, "Oh yeah, and by the way, no amendments today on the House floor. The President of the Senate said he's not accepting any amendments on the House floor. So sorry, you're out of luck." Well, that wasn't acceptable because there was absolutely no opposition, no reason. This was $500,000 to the county. Everybody was in agreement. There was no opposition. And I suggested, could I go to Senator Williams and make it a bipartisan effort? Would he be perhaps open to that? And he said, you know, give it a shot, see what you can do. I couldn't find Senator Williams. This is literally me running around the State House. I couldn't find Senator Williams. I was able to get Senator Skindell engaged, and he let me sit in his office while we got the amendment drafted for another bill, identified the bill, talked with the sponsors of the bill, talked with the departments who this bill would impact, and finally got Senator Williams in front of President Faber. Lo and behold, he agreed to the amendment. It was one of 2 amendments that he allowed on the floor that day, and we got our $500,000.
Why do we tell you that story? One, it's to demonstrate sort of the lightning speed that things happen in Columbus. Again, this was money that, you know, had already been appropriated, and it just hadn't been spent. And we were going to lose it. We found out about it sort of at the 11th hour. I think it was actually Dave Merriman, if I'm not mistaken, informed us about it. We got right to work, as Rachel indicated. And while we thought we had a victory, it seemed as things were going along, as the game was being played, it looked like we were being defeated. And what's really good about the story is, one, the outcome. We were able to save the money for the county for a very worthwhile program. But also, you see how bipartisan legislation works on an issue that should really be not partisan at all and to the benefit of needy people here in Cuyahoga County. So you had our delegation, including Senator Williams and Senator Skindell, working for us. You had Representative Amstutz. You had Senate President Faber. One way, shape, or form, everyone was pulling to get this thing done. I remember driving back from Columbus at a rest stop outside of Mansfield, I think it was, and in touch with Representative Amstutz's office, saying, you know, what is the status of this amendment? Oh, we're very well aware of it. We're going to do everything we can to get it through, and we got it done. So that was a positive development that we're pretty proud of.
And also, so this is timely because Senator Williams is coming to the county to meet with Executive Budish and Dave Merriman and Director Triazzi and others on Monday. And some of those dollars are being used to fund a Seattle Jobs Initiative, which is a federally known best practices for SNAP recipients. And so we're going to be able to share with her what those dollars are going towards and how Cuyahoga County can be a model to other places. And then just moving along, certified mail. This is something we've been working on for a couple of years, and I think it's been going on long before we started working on it. But the Board of Revisions alone spends $300,000 on certified mail, and 70% of it gets returned. We did get a bill introduced, and there has been some activity and discussions on it. Nothing will happen this year. It hasn't moved out of committee yet, but we're hoping that this will catapult some activity next year. Some other things that happened on behalf of Cuyahoga County at the State House this year. We helped organize a meeting with Director McCarthy at the Department of Medicaid on infant mortality. It was a really powerful meeting. All of the leaders of First Cleveland came and sat across the table and talked about how important an infant mortality grant was going to be, and explained how First Year Cleveland was coming together to be sort of the central point to help this, in this problem in the county. Executive Budish held an April delegation meeting with our State House delegation. A good percentage of them came, and we were able to talk about issues that are important to the county. We have another one that we'll be scheduling in the fall. Coming up next month, we're bringing Director Carter and Director Perstow to Columbus. We have a day full of meetings for each of them with key people in Columbus. They're both from out of state, and they need to know who to know in Columbus and what to know in Columbus.
And that's important because when we talked at the very beginning about the agenda setting exercise that went on during the summer and concluded in August, we certainly got to know the directors, and we certainly came to realize that these two directors in particular that have very important policy portfolios are not from the state, really don't have any, frankly, of the institutional, political, or policy knowledge that, frankly, all of you have. And they also don't know a lot of the key players, such as the directors. And when we came and met with them, one of the things that we offered immediately is, would it be helpful for us to, make introductions and give you an opportunity to meet some of the key players in the administration? And they were very excited about that. So we got right to work on that, and those meetings are set up, and we're excited. I mean, as all of you know, being elected officials, knowing the right people to whom to interact with, to call, to correspond with, to advocate, that is absolutely key. So with some of these newer folks that you've been able to recruit to take these key positions from out of state, we're trying to step in the breach and help make sure that they're as effective in Columbus for you as we possibly can make them be.
We're on track to start questions about 6 o'clock. So
are you telling us that we're taking too long?
I'm trying to do it in a very nice way, but
we
appreciate that.
Let me just go for it. All right. What I'm going to do at this point is go ahead and skip forward to the grant awards. Okay. We've had some successes. The county's had some successes in getting some grant awards. You can see them right there. Again, one of the important and strong efforts is to bring grant dollars from the state to the county, and that's a continuing effort. One of these things, the state grant award regarding for matching dollars for the airport. Do you want to talk about that one?
Just briefly.
Change the slide.
Oh, sorry. So Councilman Miller, you had mentioned that airport improvements, and others have mentioned that's an important issue. The airport itself was very successful this year and got a big grant from the FAA. The state is going to match it at $833,000. But what I wanted to just point out was that there were dollars included in the state budget last time, about $6 million for airport improvements, an airport improvement grant program. And we did not apply for those. And I talked with the Department of Transportation, their aviation section, and they thought that they were probably very much engaged in the FAA grant, but that they are requesting those dollars again in their budget, and they do expect to get them. And in particular, there's a weather reporting program that the county had wanted in the past that got denied, and so we're just encouraging our agency to apply for those grants this year, because there were 2 rounds of grants and we didn't apply to either one. I also learned they were sending them to the wrong place, the information about the grants, so we corrected that. But
okay, next slide. A couple other things we want to point out to you, and then we'll and please interrupt us anytime. So something that had been percolating for a number of years was the increase of the foster age, which got done effective actually last week, and that allows payments to or on behalf of persons up to 21 years of age, and $550,000 was included to fund this program, because initially this was an unfunded mandate. Now it's funded. We'll see how it goes forward. We have a bunch of slides on the new medical marijuana bill, HB 523. This could be the subject of a whole different tutorial. And we're happy to discuss it now. I get the sense from the chairman he probably would like to discuss it some other time, if at all. But this is a whole new, basically a whole new market, a whole new world when it comes.
I think
to marijuana.
a brief summary would be appropriate.
Okay.
So, I mean, the law passed in early September. There's a number of things happening. There's about to be an advisory commission that's going to be appointed within 30 days of the law taking effect. And then they deliberate and provide recommendations to the 3 state departments that adopt rules under this program: the Board of Pharmacy, the State Medical Board, and the Department of Commerce. And they all have their areas of oversight. It should not be fully operational for 2 years.
And it's not operational right now.
No, not yet. Municipalities and townships have specific authority to limit the number of marijuana facilities in their jurisdiction. Counties do not have the ability to do that. What we've seen is that a number of municipalities have taken the initiative, including Cleveland introduced a resolution, what day is it? Last week, I believe. Last week, to just put a moratorium on any approvals for any marijuana facilities for a year, which really doesn't have much of an impact because there shouldn't be anything happening for 2 years. But I think they're just taking a measured approach. On the other side of that, there's an area in Johnstown outside of Columbus where they are actually passed a resolution that said no facility shall be denied as long as they follow all the laws and they're legal. So some municipalities are, they're going to get a lot of tax dollars. There happens to be a manufacturing facility in Johnstown that extracts oil out of marijuana. So, yeah. And then just from a county perspective, a county as employers, I mean, the law was very careful to make sure that employers are protected, that employers can maintain their drug-free workplaces, that if you let an employee go because of their use of medical marijuana, all the same protections apply to the county as an employer as they would today. So there's a number of slides on that issue and how that works. Estimated sales tax is up to $400 million in the state.
Yeah, that's for the state.
And then just, for our criminal justice, OVI offenses, you're not allowed to operate a vehicle if you're under the influence of medical marijuana, but a law enforcement officer is not allowed to give you a sobriety test simply if you're a registered patient. They have to see proof or some evidence that you are actually have taken medical marijuana recently. And then there's some special efforts for veterans and indigent patients in the law as well.
And let me say that from the law firm's perspective, I mean, this is a brand new law. It's literally in the infant stages of being implemented. Regulations haven't been drafted. There's a lot of work that has to be done. If you ever want us to come to talk to the full council or to meet with any of your people from your human resources department, in addition to what the law director and what the law department is doing, we are very happy to do that, certainly free of charge, because this is something that we have to follow very carefully because it's legislative, but it's also legal. Why don't we talk about there's a lot of legislation that is pending dealing with the opioid epidemic.
And still a lot more to do. Yeah. But I just wanted to highlight a couple things that have been done this past year. The threshold needed for possession of heroin for an F1 was reduced. There's some immunity to prosecution for somebody that seeks help for somebody else or themselves from an overdose. And then, to show you how far this epidemic has gone, there is a law that is specifically set up to educate veterinarians because folks are going to their veterinarian to get the opiates that should be going to their pets. Other laws that passed this year, I mean, a lot of these I don't really need to go over. You guys are well aware, I'm sure, the residency requirements.
Do you want to talk in any detail about the residency requirement legislation? Because I know that was pretty controversial. I get the sense, yes.
I mean, it did pass. There was an effort in the House. They actually included a prohibition on project labor agreements in the House. It was sort of an interesting strategy, but the Senate was never going to support that. So they went ahead and passed their own bill that had passed the House without the PLA prohibition. So anyways, residency requirements passed. It should have become effective August 31st, but as you know, the city of Cleveland filed an injunction which was agreed to, and there's a permanent injunction that's scheduled for November 7th. So
it wasn't agreed to; it was granted. But
granted.
It's okay.
Sorry, he's the lawyer.
I have to act like a lawyer every now and then. But being back at a lobbyist, Executive Budish is of record opposing this particular legislation. He sent a letter actually to all of the members of the General Assembly expressing his strong opposition, but the politics of it were such that it passed. We'll see what happens ultimately as it winds through the courts.
If the legislation is ultimately upheld, to what extent can the same thing be done on a voluntary basis and perhaps most of what's currently being done still being done? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, it could be done. I mean, this talks about a requirement, an actual quota. I mean, if it becomes a matter of contract between the parties, that's a different issue. I don't think the legislation really specifically deals with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fine.
A couple of other bills. You will be able to register to vote online. There was some controversy because they specifically said it would begin after the election in January of 2017, but starting next year, folks can register to vote online.
Yeah, so, I'm sorry.
So this would be new registrants, not just changes. Is that
I think
correct?
it's
I think it would be both. I
think
mean,
it's both.
essentially, it's allowing the voter registration process, whether it's new registrations, changes, whether it's addresses, your name, if you get married, that kind of thing. That'll be done online. That was one of the, that was one of the bills that got passed in sort of the de facto lame duck before they broke for the spring. That was in May, and this was one of those situations, and Councilman Miller knows this very well, where it became pretty partisan and pretty heatedly so, because the big issue, as Rachel indicated, was, okay, if we think this is such a great idea, we're going to have online voter registration, well, why don't we just do it now? Because we've got like this big election coming up in November, we're going to be electing a new president and so on, and this was, a summary of what we saw being debated on the House floor. I saw it myself since I was there. So you saw some partisan bickering there. Ultimately, the legislation was overwhelmingly passed, including with the votes of some people that were speaking out against it in terms of deferring the effective date until after the election.
Moving on, the shared services liability bill, Councilman Greenspan came and testified on that, and I believe there was a resolution that went through. But it passed, and it just cleared up some liability issues if you share your equipment, who's liable for damages or injuries. Coroner's law, that specifically had a provision in there for Dr. Gilson because he did not live in the state immediately the 2 years prior to him being appointed, so now that's allowed in charter counties specifically. Downtown redevelopment innovation districts, we just like to follow these because they're potential economic development drivers and opportunities for Cuyahoga County. There's a provision in there about studying historic preservation tax credits because there was an effort to try to remove those in, I don't remember which bill, I think one of the budget bills, and Executive Budish opposed that. So now they're studying it. Foreclosure law changes, significant foreclosure law changes to fast track the process and to create an online sheriff's sale auction. There's a dollar deed program, which is just an option for banks to help people that can hand their deed over to the lender and they can lease it back to the individual so they don't have to move out of the home or have it foreclosed upon. And then a public records provision that was changed that just allows a process in the Court of Claims to help mediate when folks are denied public records.
That last piece of legislation was particularly important to the Senate President, Keith Faber.
Sales tax holiday, as you know, it happened August 5th, 6th, and 7th. There's still some question as to if the state is losing money or state and county losing money or if they're gaining money, because a study was done by the University of Cincinnati that said that all of the other activity that occurred around the sales tax holiday actually brought in more revenue than would have happened otherwise, although they were hired by the retail merchants. So there's some question as to whether or not that's a fair and balanced study. The Department of Tax said that they would provide those numbers that we need to determine whether or not, because the legislature would like to make this a permanent thing, and it's a lot of potential loss for the county if that happens. The local tax fiscal revisions, House Bill 166, that was where our land bank amendments were placed, so that was particularly important, but that also did some other things about certified mail and homestead tax exemption deadlines.
Right, we're now at the place, Councilman Miller, we're going to start weaving in some of the issues that are most of interest to you. And as you can see, a lot of this is undone, and there's opportunities.
Just some things that have happened outside of the legislative process over the last actually couple of months, but there was a rule that passed that would have prohibited layering of federal and state dollars for early childhood education. It would have put $12 million in jeopardy in the state, and just very recently, Governor Kasich and his administration agreed to put that rule on hold for a year.
I'm sure that you saw all this. This got a lot of statewide media play. The administration took quite a bit of heat over this. Advocacy organizations really chimed in, as did newspapers, other interested parties, and the Kasich administration pulled it, but it's not done. It's being further studied.
The Healthy Ohio waiver, this was a provision that passed in the budget last year that would have required certain individuals to pay a little bit of their premiums for their health care coverage. That was ultimately denied by CMS, and they said that it undermined access.
Great.
Right, well, yeah, and I should mention that, as part of the policymaking process and an opportunity to interact with your directors and other leaders, we had an opportunity to spend some time with John Corlett, who came and presented on this very specifically and really gave us a preview of how this whole process was going to play out. We were pretty confident that there was going to be the denial of the waiver, and some very good policy reasons behind why that was.
One of the things that Director McCarthy had said was one of the reasons why it was going to be denied was because there was the way that the legislation was drafted, there was no flexibility for them to try to meet what they knew the CMS wanted for this. So we will keep a close eye on what they do this next budget attempt, but I would suspect that we'll see some more activity on this issue coming up. Oh, wait. Yeah, behavioral. So behavioral health redesign, I did see a note about the mental health issue, and I think I was thinking that this was the issue you were talking about. You're specifically talking about the funding that Cuyahoga County gets, the 10% versus the rest of the state, and that is an issue. It has been discussed many times. What I consistently hear is Cuyahoga County is better suited to take care of themselves than some of these other counties. So it's just a constant education and it's not fair, and we will continue to advocate for it.
Well, Councilman Miller, to that point, I know this is something that you've championed since you were in Columbus, and it's something that's been a source of frustration to you and others too, because yet another one of those formulas that seems to work against us. Matter of fact, I was asked to attend a meeting at the juvenile court a couple months ago, same issue, dealing with reimbursement formulas. Any suggestions you can give us in terms of messaging and advocacy on this issue? Because as Rachel indicated, we're not exactly getting sympathetic ears, and this is another situation where you're seeing sort of the rural versus urban favoritism, if you will, that sometimes plays against us.
Well, my only suggestion is that given the current makeup of the legislation, the political environment, I don't see how you could do it as a standalone item. But there's always package deals that take place in Columbus, and this needs to work its way into a package deal where this gets fixed and some other things that are important to some other people get fixed at the same time.
Great.
It's a great observation. We need all the champions we can get on behalf of Cuyahoga County, and I'm sure your words have been heard.
One thing that Executive Budish has done too is he's really wanted to partner with the other metro counties, and they've worked closely with, in particular, Hamilton.
Cities, yeah.
Well, yeah, and Hamilton and Franklin in particular, but that's another, partnership that he's forming to be a leader on those metro issues and with the CCAO as well.
Yeah, I mean, I should have mentioned that. Thank you. I should have mentioned that at the very beginning, and that was one of the charges we were given very, very directly by Law Director Triazzi, and that is you've got to be looking for your allies, particularly in the larger urban counties.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I could, and some of our staff last week, there was a metro call, and this issue, the issue of overall funding formula, substance abuse was the original topic, but it spills over into everything. And the metro counties on the call, and even our meeting on Friday was discussed. We had an in-person meeting in Columbus on Friday with all the county commissioners, that are on the board. The funding issue is clearly a challenge recognized by the 10 metro counties, and there is a coalition, whether it's being directed by the executive or not, that's forming as a result of, the executive participating is good. I'm not denying that, but what I'm saying is this was happening organically anyhow because of the challenges, whether you're talking about us, Lucas, Franklin, Hamilton, Montgomery, you can go down the list of the top 10. It's a disproportionate amount of funding coming to our counties based on the demands and needs that we have. So this is being, CCO, it's on their agenda for next year, on their agenda policy for next year, and it's something that's being heard.
Thank you. That's
thank
very
you.
helpful. Thank you.
The behavioral health redesign is something that happened over time, the last budget in particular, but the administration is changing. They're putting the mental health more like physical health, the way that Medicaid deals with it. They're putting it into Medicaid managed care starting in 2018, and the way that they're billing in their codes. So Director Perstow is working with other metro counties it's more of a program issue, but it's a big change. So I wanted to make sure to mention it.
This would probably be a good time to mention the session calendar, such as it is. Thanks, that's right. That was just changed as of this morning.
Yeah, well, yesterday.
So the Senate, we've got really one day for this month. October's been canceled. And then they're going to come back in November and in December, and that's where the action will be. God bless you.
Bless you.
There is not a more dangerous time for the people of the state of Ohio than the lame duck session of the legislature.
Duly noted.
Yeah. What's interesting is the House and the Senate are really sort of on different. I mean, before yesterday, when President Faber announced he was canceling a number of sessions, they have 14 session days planned, and the House had 5. So it's the Speaker of the House is not term limited. The President of the Senate is. Perhaps they have different agendas, but they sort of both need to be there to get things done.
And let me just say this, if you don't mind switching the slide. I mean, you know this. Lame duck, very much, it's a bad analogy, but I use it. It's a moving target. It really is. I mean, we pay real close attention, and I think a lot of this is going to be driven by the Senate. I really do. We watch very carefully what the Senate President has to say that the Speaker as well. And these areas of potential lame duck activity, it's just that. I mean, we feel fairly confident that there's going to be some legislation in these areas because of the priority and the need, but there's no guarantee that these. Well, I think we're pretty confident these issues will be taken up. There's certainly no guarantee that there will
what they'll look like.
Yeah, there'll be ultimate passage.
Yeah, in particular, infant mortality. There was an infant mortality commission that was created, came out with a number of recommendations. There's legislation pending that includes those recommendations, and President Faber announced it will be a priority for the Senate. Energy mandates, there was a freeze, and that will expire in December. So there's some varying views on how that should look, but there will likely be some activity on energy mandates.
There'll be huge lobbying on that one.
Yeah. Unemployment compensation.
Big. It's big.
Yeah, it's big.
Yeah.
There is an effort to overhaul the unemployment compensation program. It hasn't been done since like the 80s, but there's a lot of opposition to the bill that's currently pending, House Bill 394. So they created an unemployment compensation reform joint committee, and they're having a number of hearings right now to try to come up with something that everybody can agree to. There's an opiate MBR that passed the Senate. It's awaiting action in the House. I do suspect there'll be a lot of activity on this as well. I mean, what it currently contains, I've summarized here. Suboxone is a treatment drug to help. It's like a methadone type of substance. Expanded access to naloxone, put it into schools, into homeless shelters, halfway houses. Register pharmacy technicians because there's no oversight of pharmacy technicians, and to limit the prescriptions for how long you can have an opiate prescription. This has gotten so much attention, I could see this expanding, and I actually hope that it does, so that some more dollars can be put into the counties for recovery and others.
Let me, if you don't mind, let me take.
It says opiate MBR. What is MBR?
Mid-biennium
Review bills.
Oh.
and that's a sort of a creation of the governor.
Thing.
Yeah, having a budget bill wasn't good enough to get policies. So during the off year, the off budget year, these were budget bills, and he started this really right after he took office in 2011. Got a lot of policy done that didn't get done out of the budget.
Biennial.
So a couple other things that I just want to touch on real quickly for potential lame duck. Public Office Compensation Commission, you'll recall, maybe you do, maybe you don't, that the legislature really tried to tackle the issue of compensation. They did do it in the Senate, mostly with leadership of President Faber. It didn't get any House activity. This is just how they're going to address ongoing adjustments to compensation for public officials. That's a possible impact. Of course, that may not have very much impact here because we're a charter county, but it may impact, say, for instance, prosecuting attorneys and judges. Campaign finance is an area that may be covered in the lame duck. Again, may not have a direct impact on charter counties. Civil asset forfeiture, again, that really kind of arises out of the criminal justice system. This deals with civil forfeitures, perhaps after 1 year, and there's some specific requirements for the crimes in question. That is also pending in the Senate. That one passed the House. The dog sales, I remember that one became very
I just think it's going to be a lame duck issue.
Right.
It's not going to be one that necessarily impacts the county, but
yeah.
I think it'll reappear.
What did I take?
Well, so this is just looking ahead to next General Assembly. You know, we're already starting to prepare for the budget.
We know that picture of the governor was not taken at the convention. We know that for a fact. I don't know where it was taken, but I know it wasn't here.
No. But an issue that Council Miller mentioned, I'm sure you're all aware of, is the Medicaid managed care sales tax. That's going away at the end of 2017. I mean, you know, Councilman Greenspan, I know, has been a lot of these meetings with Director Keene, came and spoke, and right now we're hearing that you know, that we could expect to perhaps get about 80% of what we're expected to lose. I don't know what that will look like, how they'll propose that, but we're not expected to know that until the governor puts forth his budget objectives. There was some discussion, you know, sort of behind the scenes about whether or not the state would consider taking away the indigent defense funding that the county is responsible for and the elections funding that the county is responsible, and take that off the county plate, and to see if that would make up for the, I don't know what those numbers look like or how Cuyahoga County would feel about that, but that's something else that's been thrown around. No, will the numbers not work? Because I'm worried about that proposal, but.
The other thing about that is that it wouldn't do anything for the public transit. And in Cuyahoga County, the RTA loses almost as much as we do.
It's hugely significant.
I would, if I could interject, just
Please.
from a CCO standpoint, they sent out the CCO sent out to all 88 counties kind of their top priority and issues going forward. And this item, this managed sales tax loss, was by far the number one. Not every, I think only 35 counties responded, but everyone responded that did respond as this as being their number one issue.
And President Faber, you know, sent a letter to the counties and others on this issue. It's a big deal. It's a lot of money.
I mean, look, this is again something that we've talked pretty extensively about. There are a lot of stakeholders here. I mean, certainly one of the things that we talked about was perhaps more effectively engaging our business community to lobby, particularly on public transportation dollars, to see if we can get some of those replaced. I mean, there's obviously a lot of components to make this effective.
And then the final two slides are just, you know, some of the issues that, you know will be included or likely be included in the biennial budget, and things that we will be keeping our eye on, among others. You know, public transit is included in there, and airport improvements and Medicaid reform and local government funding in general.
Yeah, and what I wanted to say in conclusion, of course, we welcome additional questions, is county's been pretty active and will continue to be active at the State House. You've got a certain amount of traction. I think we gave you some good examples. Your legislative delegation is, in my view, and Councilman Miller, you may agree or disagree because you used to be a member of it, you know, we're really trying to work as a delegation as much as possible. I think that it's somewhat easier to do that because your county executive is a former speaker and certainly a former member. I mean, he just sort of thinks about Columbus. He thinks about the legislature. I like to think, a lot of sophisticated policy making that's going on within the county, and your advocates in Columbus have a role there. I mean, part of it, of course, is trying to draw down and bring back as many dollars as we can. We understand that, but there's more to it than that, particularly when you look at social safety net issues like infant mortality is a really good example, and we're going to see some activity on that, we expect, in the lame duck. So, it continues to be active, and we want to continue to be as effective as we possibly can on your behalf.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for your presentation. Questions by my colleagues? Yes. Councilman Germana.
Concerning this, and you probably won't be able to answer this, but I'm just wondering if this opioid crisis and heroin, and a lot of it stems from pain management. I'm just wondering if this medical marijuana becoming legal will have an effect of stunting the growth of the crisis.
Well, I think what an interesting question you asked. I think it depends on who you ask. As you know, this was a very controversial issue in terms of overall legalization. Issue 3 last year, which was resoundingly defeated, but the next thing that resulted was medical marijuana, which passed with quite a bit of bipartisan support. Many would say that just exactly what that you said, that it might stunt. It could be a drug that would prevent greater addiction on stronger and harder medications. But others who are opposed would say what you often hear, and that is this is a gateway drug, and we're really asking for trouble, and you're essentially legalizing something that might lead to further addiction and make a situation that's already bad worse. The reality is, and your question presupposed the answer is we really don't know. What we can say, and I know, Rachel, you were very active during the hearing, so please chime in. What we can say is that the mechanism that the legislature has put in is really intended to be medical marijuana, that you have to demonstrate a true specified need for this particular medication. It has to be handled. It has to be prescribed by a doctor under specific rules. The pharmacy has to be licensed. I mean, there's many different legal steps along the way to control this. It's not supposed to be like other places, California, for example, where it's almost, and I don't know if anybody from California is watching, but it's kind of like a joke. Where you just claim some sort of an illness, and some doc writes a script, and you go down and have a good time. That's not what this is intended to be. The reality is we don't know how this is going to play out, because, as I said earlier, so much of the enabling regulation it just hasn't been written yet. So we're going to find out. What do you have to add on that?
Oh, I would just, it's still a Schedule I drug at the federal level. And so there's a lot of nuances that have to go into this rulemaking to make doctors even want to prescribe it, because they could be putting their license in jeopardy. So the rules are going to be very important in how it works. But absolutely, during testimony, individuals came forward and said, I've got these massive headaches, and every time I go to the doctor, they give me opiates, and I don't want opiates, but I can take a hit off a joint and I feel better right away, and you're telling me that I can't use that as my medicine, and you're feeding me these opiates. So, I mean, in theory, yes, it could replace some of that, is the hope, but the rules have to work. It has to be a program that actually works.
Well, I have no expert ability to testify to this, but I don't know anybody that's ever died from overdose of marijuana.
Yep. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I would, from a policy-making standpoint, what I would mention to all of you is there's going to be this advisory committee that's sort of being formed right now that's going to have representatives from the medical community and patient advocates and other interest groups that are really supposed to get together and make recommendations dealing with the implementation of this new law. So I would encourage you to look at this very carefully. I mean, the decision's been made, the legislation's been passed, and now the rubber really meets the road when you get into implementation, and we really don't know yet. I mean, if I had to guess, I think looking 5 years into the future, there'll be some studies done and conclusions reached that no one even necessarily thought of. But it's really remarkable. I mean, we're changing a whole dynamic. I mean, this is a whole new industry. I mean, obviously, many see it as a tremendous business opportunity, which it is. I mean, let's be very honest. But so many feel very, very strongly about the medicinal benefits of this drug, and we'll see what the consequences are, intended and unintended. I mean, we'll be watching as closely as you, Councilman.
Aside from the question of the impact from the Medicaid sales tax, could you say a little bit more about what can be done to reverse the years and years of spectacular decline in public transit funding? It's just become a major problem. I mean, it's almost down to nothing.
Again, that's an issue that we want to partner with the other metro counties where it's an issue for all of us. It is almost down to nothing, but it's one of those issues where you're competing with everything else that needs dollars. But it is getting more attention. I do see that it's rising more to the top. It is included in agendas for next General Assembly. We've talked about in the administration about getting the business community more involved and more engaged, so that they need their workers to be able to get to work. So maybe this General Assembly will be more open to hearing from their businesses.
In the short run, my thinking is that the most important priority would be to try to make sure that any fix that's done on the Medicaid sales tax would include the public transit and not just the other governments.
Well, if I could interject on that sales tax, it's not just the $21 million, the $17 million or the money. It's $500 million to the state, but the total impact I heard was $3.5 billion over 2 years because of the match that money was originally intended to provide. So statewide, it's 5 or 3.7 billion is the total impact to the state in loss of revenue,
right,
or revenue and matching fund
dollars.
Opportunities. So it's huge and
huge problem.
Yeah, the state has to address it. So it's just a matter of how.
Councilman, we knew you were going to ask that question. I mean, it was we were told ahead of time, but we knew anyway. And this is becoming more of a crisis issue, particularly here in Cuyahoga County. So look, I mean, I'm a councilman in Shaker Heights, so the rapid transit is very much part of our life's blood. When I go home tonight, I'm going to be taking the rapid, but I sure know I'm not going to be doing it after 9 o'clock because I might have to camp out at Shaker Square.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of inconveniences. There are a lot more cuts. I mean, we're asking our residents to pay more money for less service, and nothing is more frustrating from an elected official standpoint than that. I totally understand. This is where we see, in my personal view, this is where we see the rural versus urban control of the legislature play out to our detriment. I just think it's going to take a lot more willpower, a lot more effort, particularly the other, as Rachel indicated, the other larger metropolitan counties banding together and try to restore some of this funding, because we saw studies where, on a per capita basis, we're either at the bottom of the list or right down there, and that's ridiculous when you consider what a built-out county we are and how dependent we are on public transportation. It's ridiculous.
I can also say that what you're starting to see isn't just the 10 counties, but it's their adjoining counties. Look, we know in Cuyahoga County that people come in from our adjoining counties to participate in whatever Cleveland or the Cuyahoga County has to offer. So it even gets down to federal transportation dollars when you look at the money spent on our roads and bridges, because obviously the 1.3 million people aren't the only people using our roads and bridges when they come into Cleveland to go to an Indians game. And so it's a much larger discussion, but it's one that I believe we're starting to see from the county commissioner's side, the adjacent counties. I mean, I talked to the county commissioners from Lake County and even Ashtabula on a pretty regular basis about some of these issues, because they impact us as a region, and you're starting to see some coalescing. But there is, as Rob mentioned, and Dale, as you've experienced, there is clearly a divide when you start talking about rural versus urban or even suburban dollars. So I think you're starting to see some coalescing because the funding is getting scarce, and that causes alliances.
Anything else? Anyone?
Mr. Chairman, just as a retiring county councilman, I just want to assure the public that I have no potential lame duck activity planned.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, well, we really appreciate your efforts on our behalf. We look forward to continuing to work with us. I think the environment is also going to be shaped by events that occur at the national level in 7 weeks. We don't know what that's going to be, but I think it's going to be pretty significant in either direction. And we appreciate your service. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Okay. Is there any miscellaneous business?
Just wondering when they'll come back to give another update.
Well, it's been a year since the last one, but I don't think we should wait that long. I think we should probably. When would be?
Mr. Zimmerman?
I'm sorry, what?
We're talking about when you can come back, and I mean, it's been a year since the last one, but we're thinking it probably shouldn't be that long, and we're wondering what you think in relation to the budget cycle. Should it be shortly after the budget is introduced, when you see what its broad outlines are?
Yeah, we were just talking about that on the way over here. Because in addition to presenting to you, we'd like to, at some point between now and the introduction of the budget, have another delegation meeting. But we think in terms of it being most useful for a reporting standpoint, and also to get your input right around the introduction of the budget. So, you know, late January, early February might be a good time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
No, Mr. Chair.
Move to adjourn.
So moved. I'm not even on. Second.
Yes. Yes, I think. Okay, we're adjourned.
What's that?